Hey Kelly, how you doing this week?
I'm doing pretty good. I found a new doctor, a general care practitioner, and I don't know if other people have the same issue that I do with finding a good GP, but I found one, and so I'm pretty excited about that.
That's great. Did you have an appointment or anything this week? Or
Yes, I did. So I've been having some anxiety issues. So, they actually had to do an EKG and everything. Everything turned out fine.
good?
So, yeah, everything's good.
Yeah, that's always a good thing when you come back clear with that stuff.
Yes, for sure. I'm not having a heart attack. I'm just having some anxiety issues.
Alrighty. Well, this week, I actually lost a couple more pounds, which is awesome.
Ooh.
I'm almost down 20 pounds since January, which is kind of where I want to be at. You don't want to lose too much at one time
Well, right.
because then you get loose skin, and it's just I don't want that. So, you know, stuff
How
like
many more do you have to go to reach your goal?
So my goal is 200 pounds. So I got 28 to go,
Okay.
and I've already 3 months in. Well, beginning of April is 4, so I'm already
You're doing pretty good.
almost halfway there. So I'm doing pretty good right now. Just haven't really changed anything up. Changed the exercise program a little bit, but nothing extensive. So
Right.
it's still going down. So that's always good. So this week we're going to talk about are foods addictive. Okay, everybody knows that potato chips taste amazing, and we're just basically going to talk about why they taste amazing.
What's the Pringles slogan? Once you pop, you can't stop.
That is the
Yes,
slogan.
it
Yeah.
is for real.
Yeah, I think
The struggle is real.
yeah, especially when you open them, you can't. It's like, oh, it's just one more, and then the can's gone, and you're like, oh, well, that's sad.
Shoot.
Yeah, so we're really just talking about kind of like how the brain works and stuff like that, because it's going to come back to how your body responds in regards to that. So it's about a reward system in your brain. Okay, so humans, as we all know, are meant to survive and reproduce. Okay, to survive, you need to eat food.
And only then can we actually reproduce.
Yeah.
We have to survive, and to survive, we have to eat.
Exactly. So, you know, eating and doing the dirty is both pleasurable activities.
Some people call it intercourse.
Yeah, doing the dirty.
Put earmuffs over your kids.
Yeah, exactly.
We're talking about sex.
And then, what is the reaction you get after eating or doing the activity? Usually you feel pretty good about yourself, or
Right.
when you're eating, you feel satisfied. But maybe when you're eating a specific food, I would think mine, if I was to take it off the top of my head, probably cookies. Because my wife can attest, I went to my father-in-law's this weekend.
Oh boy.
Sundays are my cheat days. I go ham and I eat whatever.
Right.
I don't eat
like
ham.
all day.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
Well, within reason. I stop probably about 4 o'clock. I don't go all night. But I probably ate half the cookies in this cookie jar.
Oh god.
So that's like a package of Chips Ahoy Oreos. I ate half of those. And Johanna's always looking at me, what? Are you still eating? I'm like, yeah, I fasted for 24 hours. I deserve these cookies. And that's one of my guilty pleasure foods for right now that I can think of. Do you have any that you think of?
Oh my god. Do I have any? Oh my gosh, yeah. So donuts are always the first thing that come to mind for me. Easter candy, as you well know, you brought me Peeps. That's one of my favorites. And Cadbury eggs. Easter candy is really dangerous stuff for me. Cake, cheesecake. So I'm a sweets person. If I'm going to have a struggle with anything or binge on something, it's definitely going to be sweets.
And I think that's a lot of people, though.
Yeah.
Because, my dad doesn't like sweets. He'd rather eat, like, steak and potatoes and stuff like that. He doesn't like sweets at all. But
Right.
I know my mom's more of a sweet tooth. But, yeah, I think the vast majority of people just like sweet.
I think, well, and again, I think that goes back to, though, how the brain operates and how we evolved. When we found something sweet in nature, our hunter-gatherer ancestors, sweet things were not something they came across very often.
Right.
So things like honey or apple, even fruits were only available at certain times of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they came across those things, our brain is programmed to binge on those things and to eat a lot of those things because, again, it's a survival mechanism.
I think usually, well, back in those days, we would just store all that anyways, or
Yes.
use it for, hunting down a deer or whatever. But I mean,
Well, and when you think about it, our ancestors, the number one threat that they faced was starvation.
right.
And so this is, just as a side note, this is why dieting is so difficult and why it's so hard for people to lose weight and maintain a weight loss. It's because we are not wired to restrict food. We are actually wired to eat. Our brain and body don't want us to lose weight because our brain and body are still operating under that ancient system where, there could be a famine at any moment. And of course, our body and our brain doesn't really know that, well, there's food everywhere now. And of course, it's all of this super hyper palatable, delicious, chemically engineered food, basically.
Oh yeah, I mean, thinking if 100 years from now, maybe a little bit more, you actually had to go out and work to get what you ate, and now drive up to McDonald's and they got selections of crap, and you go to Walmart, there's walls of food. I couldn't imagine if you dug someone up and reincarnated that person, what they would do. They'd probably have a heart attack because they couldn't imagine how much food we have.
They wouldn't, first of all, they wouldn't really recognize half of what we're eating as food. But
yeah.
I actually think we need to stop, and some people think this is a little woo-woo, but we need to stop and appreciate our bodies for a second. We need to appreciate the fact that we're asking our bodies to operate in a completely alien environment. Think about, even in just the past 100 years, how much our life and our environment has changed. So and I like to make the comparison of just a few simple things. So our great-great-grandfathers and our ancestors woke and went to bed with the sun, so they didn't have electricity. They spent 90% of their day outdoors, actively doing physical labor. They had to find, grow, raise, and cook all their own food. And imagine that if you just wanted a simple chicken dinner, what actually goes into that. So for our great-great-great-grandparents, it would be 16-ish weeks to raise a chicken. You have to grow all of its feed, and then you have to kill the chicken, pluck it, process it, and then cook it. If you want to make a cake, you have to raise the chickens and the cows for the eggs and the milk. You've got to grow the wheat. You have to harvest and grind the wheat to create the flour, and only then can you bake your cake. Also, we, our ancestors experienced almost zero exposure to things like toxins, chemicals, and radiation. And there were no processed foods or restaurant foods because there was none available. It just wasn't a thing. You compare that to today, we sit about 90% of our waking hours underneath artificial light. We spend less than 1 hour outdoors in natural light every day on average. We do almost zero physical labor. We don't even have to push a cart to the grocery store anymore. You can order your groceries online and they will either deliver them directly to your door, or at least they'll put them in your car for you. You just pull up to the curb. We're exposed to around 700 plus chemicals every day. Nearly 60% of the standard American diet is processed convenience food. And this is where we can get into this whole idea of, are foods addictive? Because these foods are chemically engineered to cause addictive levels of pleasure. So, yikes. So again, that just goes back, I like to get people to appreciate our, the fact that we're, it's a struggle for all of us to maintain our health and fitness and maintain our weight, but we are asking our bodies to operate in a completely foreign environment.
Oh, right. And then when you talk about just the weight loss the side of things, we know just from experience, if you do the same consistent diet, exercise routine, you're going to be stagnant, and you have to usually change it up because your body's very adaptable to those things at all times.
It's too bad our bodies don't adapt to like eating bags full of Oreos.
No. If that was to happen, who knows what would happen.
Right.
All right, so really, like coming back to that reward center, it's going to cause a dopamine. That's the technical term, and that's just that feel good feeling you get after eating foods. And I'm assuming uh, back in your great grandfathers, after they did all that just to eat that chicken, like, oh my gosh, this tastes so good.
It probably tasted pretty damn good.
Well, yeah, just like you finish, a task, however long it takes you to do that, you feel way better.
Right.
Just like how we started this podcast, we felt good after we started it.
That's right.
And
it was
then,
a little scary leading up to it.
But that's that trigger of just having those feel good feelings. I couldn't imagine, them back then. They probably feel the same way, but it's more intensely, especially if you're, like you said, 16 weeks just to raise a chicken and go through all that process just to eat something.
But, I think one of the key points we need to make, though, is that, one of the struggles that we face with these food companies that are hiring chemists and neuroscientists to find the bliss point, what they call the bliss point of food, which is the exact combination of sugar, salt, and fat that makes a food basically irresistible to our brain and causes us to overeat and then crave those foods more and more. Those weren't around in our grandparents, our great-great-grandparents' day and age, and our ancestors' day and age. I mean, unfortunately, the fact of the matter is there's going to be no comparison between healthy foods and things like Oreos, or, you're never going to find healthy foods that taste that way.
Right. So if you're eating a bad diet of Oreos and cookies and you go to eat a kale salad, it's going to taste like crap.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it does make it a struggle. Now, I actually had recently written a blog post about this. The good news here, it's not all bad news. The good news is that if you add nutrient-dense foods into your diet, not necessarily like taking everything away that you love, but if you start adding stuff like kale and spinach and broccoli and cauliflower, you can train your taste buds to like those things. It just takes some time, and it takes consistent effort in adding those things in on a daily basis.
Right, exactly. So I know we'll kind of talk about a little bit about addiction. Cravings are addictive in nature, right? So if I'm craving something, usually, so if I'm stressed out at the end of the day, I'm craving usually. Few months ago, I would go to, like I told you, I'd go to Dairy Queen and get like the most fattiest crap I could get, which was like what was it, Reese's something Blizzard, and I'd eat that along with some fries just to make myself feel good. And that is usually when you have those cravings, is at an emotional state where you're not at 100%, right?
Right. I think, yeah, I mean, yes. I think that there's a lot of different reasons that people overeat. And so I don't know. My feelings on the whole addiction thing, I used to really believe that, foods were addictive. And I do think to some extent that they are. And I think that they're being engineered to cause us to overeat.
Right.
At the same time, I hear a lot of times like sugar being compared to, or food addiction and sugar addiction being compared to like heroin and cocaine addiction.
Right, with the brain scans.
Right. And it is true that sugar and processed foods do light up the same areas of the brain. But I think drug and food addiction are clearly different because if sugar and processed foods were as addictive as something like heroin or cocaine, every last person who ate a little bit of a processed food or ate a little bit of sugar would be obese or dead.
Right, yeah.
So again, there's a difference. Whereas, if you, I've never tried any, like cocaine or heroin or anything or meth, but what I hear people say is that one hit and you are addicted.
Oh, it's that powerful?
Yes,
yeah.
yes. So there's clearly some sort of a difference there.
Like you said, it probably lights the same parts of the brain, like you said, but the intensity of whatever that is probably so overwhelming. It's like, okay, I'm just getting off of it. I need to go back to get more. And with food, it's not that way necessarily.
Right. I think the question really becomes, what's going on in the brain of the human who is struggling so much with, with overeating or binge eating. And like you said, I think you touched on the fact that there's usually some sort of an emotional component. And I don't think that food addiction is necessarily the problem. I think a lot of times the food addiction can be a symptom of an underlying issue. So we can learn to use food to soothe all of our woes, or you'll hear people even say that, well, when I'm happy, I overeat.
Right.
So people can use food and become addicted to food if they're using it to when they have whatever their emotional state may be.
Right, exactly.
I don't necessarily know though, like I said, I used to believe that I was addicted to sugar, when in fact I was not addicted to sugar. I was restricting myself from eating. Not only was I restricting calories, but I was restricting all of the foods I love to eat, and that's what was causing me to binge on sugar.
Yeah. So I totally agree with that. If you restrict yourself so much,
right,
then you just fall off and you just go to the deep end, and that's definitely something to consider.
I mean, when you, like in the past, when you said that you were maybe trying to get to a lower body fat, and I don't know, were you doing any crazy diets? Did you ever have a serious binge episode?
I don't know if it was a diet more so than the exercise, but I know that when I did, I would eat like pasta and chicken every single day. It's just, and people at work would, oh, hey, TJ, what you eating today? Chicken and rice and some broccoli. It's fantastic.
Right.
But,
so worth it.
Yeah, and then obviously just changing everything this year, it's way better because I eat the foods that I actually want to eat.
Right.
Are
you actively restricting any of these foods that we would potentially call addictive?
So if I'm looking at the addictive sheet, we'll kind of go over that. Let me look at these. So not really. I do those on the weekend.
Okay.
And I know that I can eat them on the weekend.
And that works for you.
Yeah, and that works. So it's like, okay, I did great all week, and then I have one day to kind of just go overboard and get a pizza or something. But when I eat a pizza, I'm not eating the whole thing. I'm eating like 3 slices maybe, and then I'm done.
See, and this is why I love this podcast, because you and I probably have had fairly different experiences. And so I did the thing for a long time where I restricted all week, and then I would have a cheat day. But my cheat day would wind up being totally out of control. So I would eat like a whole pizza and a whole gallon of and a whole gallon of ice cream. And so these were like true. It was a binge. I'm a recovering binge eater.
Right.
But it was the dieting, unfortunately, that caused me to start binging in the first place.
Especially if you're not eating the food you want to eat and you don't like
right.
them. Yeah, I mean,
right.
What I eat now, I like to eat, so it's not something that if I took them away, I probably wouldn't like that. But I'm not eating something to where, let's just say, if in the morning I had to eat oatmeal every day, oatmeal's okay, but I don't want to eat it every day with blueberries.
Right.
I just don't.
Right.
It's not. I could eat eggs and turkey bacon every morning and avocado. I'm fine.
Right.
It doesn't taste like garbage. So.
Right.
So, as we kind of go from the craving side, it's emotional. Sometimes it's, situational. Sometimes it's just walking down the street and you smell with a pizza and you want to eat pizza. But it also can, like you kind of spelled on, it turns into binge eating. I binged a little bit. I know when I was super depressed, I would binge a lot. And so there are very, very levels of what binging is. I know some people on the internet, their binges are like something I would never eat. I'd probably eat that in 2 days, maybe 3. Right. Mine would just be like 2 boxes of Swiss rolls and I'd be good. So
I think we have to make a distinction between overeating and binge eating.
sure, let's do that.
Because like I said, I'm a recovering binge eater. And honestly, it really didn't have anything to do with food addiction. And I thought it did initially, but it didn't. So there's a difference between overeating and binges, and both can be initiated by similar things like craving a specific food, but I think they are fundamentally different. So overeating is normal. Everybody does. Everybody overeats from time to time. And I know that you had described at some point to me, you had were eating in front of the TV and you polish off a bag of chips. That, and you feel bad about it, you're like, oh crap, I ate an entire bag of chips.
I think it's almost like you don't even know you're doing it.
Right. So that's overeating. So overeating tends to be characterized by mindless eating, which is eating too much because you're distracted, or eating due to stress. So stress would be like your girlfriend broke up with you, or you had a bad day at work, or something like that. Binge eating, on the other hand, is characterized by things like hiding and sneaking food, which I did. My husband discovered my wrappers one time. That was fun. And he knew at that point that I was a binge eater, so he didn't really say much about that. But still, it's, for me, it was terribly embarrassing because I was sneaking and hiding food. Complete loss of control, and sometimes even this amnesia where you don't remember starting to eat. Or you don't remember eating at all.
Oh, wow.
You did because you're so incredibly full. And then you, of course, feel awful. And that's another thing. Being extremely full, sometimes to the point of sickness, and still wanting to continue eating. And, of course, extreme shame after one of these episodes. And sometimes, which I experienced this as well, attempts to purge by exercising, fasting, vomiting, or use of laxatives, at which point it's called bulimia.
Right.
So I think we have to sort of distinguish there between the binging and the overeating.
And I would totally agree with you. Yeah, I think if you say binge eating, what you're describing
it's an eating
way
disorder.
More sense than just saying, oh, I overate on cookies and stuff. That's not even close to what you're saying.
And a lot of times, again, the binge eating, certainly food addiction can play a role because binge eaters are a lot of times are using food to cover up emotional trauma. Have you ever watched the show My 600-Pound Life?
I love TLC? That show.
Yes. Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's my husband. It's like our guilty pleasure. We watch it all the time. Well, if you noticed, one thing that these super morbidly obese people have in common, almost every one of them across the board, was abused as a child.
Yep.
Physically, sexually, verbally, something like that, or, a parent was absent or left. They experienced severe childhood trauma, almost all of them. So again, they are clearly binge eating. They have that eating disorder, and they're using it, and they at the point as an adult that they are addicted to food.
Right, yeah.
Because it's the only way that they know to cope with their feelings, right?
Yeah.
It's a defense mechanism.
And they always say, I eat because it feels good, it feels like I have a security blanket type thing, and then you see them, they're in their 30s and they're just like, I don't know how I got this big. So it's probably because they didn't realize it.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
It's just sad, especially when, there's someone trying to help them and they just can't get over it, and they always see a psychologist and stuff. Yeah.
Right.
Alrighty. So what to do? So I'm gonna let you take this one because when I think of binging, it's overeating. So I'm gonna let you take the lead on that.
So I know that there are a lot of people who would say, well, you need to avoid situations that would cause you to overeat or binge. You need to avoid the foods that would. And here's the thing. Here's what I found personally. The more I tried to avoid my binge foods and the more I tried to restrict myself, I believed at some point that I just needed to diet harder, that I needed to tighten the reins further on myself. And that never worked because every time I did that, it would cause me to binge more often and on more and more food. And so as far as avoiding, maybe it does work for some people. Everybody's different.
So would you say maybe not avoiding the food, maybe avoiding the like stressful situations or having maybe a different outlet.
I think initially you know avoiding can help in avoiding certain foods. Like I for a long time did avoid my worst trigger foods, so like donuts. I really avoided those for a long time because they like having one bite would cause me to just go off the deep end. But I do believe at some point you have to deal with the underlying feelings. And for me, I had to, again, I had to stop dieting and stop trying to lose weight. And I actually had to go, I have a system, and this is why I created an online course for this, because I know other people struggle with, you know, they've been dieting for years and years and they don't understand why they keep overeating and binging. So I created this course where, you know, basically I took myself through this series of, you know, I had to sort of go through all of my binge foods and just let myself eat them and prove to myself that I could actually trust myself again with those foods.
And to eat them as to the point where you tell yourself to stop. Or
actually, I think for me, because again, my binging and my binging, there was some underlying emotional components going on there, which I wound up dealing with. But my binging really started because of dieting.
Okay.
So for food restriction, and I got to the point where I didn't trust myself around any food. And I was even, you know, I had restricted all of the foods that I would overeat. And and at that point, I had started binging on things, healthy things like apples and nuts. And I mean, I could avoid all my trigger foods, but I was creating new trigger foods.
Oh, okay.
And so again, I had to stop restricting, and I had to allow myself to eat these foods whenever I felt the need. So I had to prove to myself that there really wasn't a shortage of donuts. Like I really was allowed to have them at any time. And yeah, at first when I started the process, I overate. I would say like when it came to the donuts, I overate donuts for the first several weeks. I gained weight. You know, there's no way around. I gained weight, but eventually my weight stabilized because, and it started to come back down after this whole process, because at some point I was like, do I really, you know, I don't need to keep eating donuts like the way that I've been eating them, because I can have them anytime that I want.
Okay. So if you were to kind of give like 3 suggestions of what to do if you're addicted to food, if there's, you know, cravings you can't avoid, you're binging, what would you suggest?
So first thing I would suggest is you need to stop restricting foods. And if you have been restricting foods, if you've been dieting and restricting foods a lot, you need to stop restricting, and you need to stop trying to lose weight for a little while. And you need to eat enough. You know, so that was another problem for me, is that I wasn't eating enough calories to begin with. And so my body was just sending out hunger signals like crazy. And one bite of a sugary food and it was over. Yeah. So you need to eat enough. And then after that, you have to go through this is my experience. You have to sort of I made a list of all of the foods that I wasn't allowed to have. And I kind of went one by one through those foods, and I started letting myself have them. And slowly but surely, and I might eat peanut butter and jelly sandwich for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And eventually, like at first I'd overeat it. And then by day 3, I'm like, oh, this is kind of getting old. Yeah. And then, you know, by day 7, I was like, you know what? I really feel like a salad. And have you ever been on a cruise or to an all-inclusive resort?
No, I have not. No.
Okay. Well, if you ever get the chance, you know, it's all like 24/7 buffet, right?
Yeah.
This is what people report. The first couple days, they overeat, right? Because there's all these crazy choices. There's so much food available. And by day 3, they're kind of over it. And by day 7, they're being much more choosy about the foods that they pick off the buffet, and they're eating less because, again, they realize that there's no shortage of food. The food is always going to be there, and they wind up starting to connect, like, I don't want to feel like crap all the time.
Sure.
And so that was another thing. I stopped wanting to feel like crap.
Right.
all the time.
And I totally agree with that, especially having that food list. So I have one cheat meal a week,
Right.
and I go through, and like one week you had KFC, and we take it home like, oh, it's gonna be good. I start eating them like, this tastes like shit.
Right. Right.
So I have a list on my phone. KFC, not on the thing. I had tried pizza, and we usually get like Papa John's and stuff. This tastes like shit. And it's just not worth it.
That's such a good point, though, is that you make about when you start to allow yourself to really taste foods and start asking yourself, do I really like this food? And if you do, eat it. But start asking yourself, is this really worth it? And
especially if you're spending money on it.
Yeah. And again, like for me, I would never waste my calories on, and I'm not against McDonald's or whatever, but I would never waste my calories on McDonald's. If I want a burger, I'm going to go find the best burger I can find.
Like Swenson's or something.
Yes. Yeah. Or like I really like Five Guys burgers. So I'm going to try and find the highest quality version of the junk food that I can find. And I'm going to eat that. So I don't want to eat, I don't know.
Yeah, you don't.
It's got to be worth it.
Exactly. I totally agree with that. So we're going to kind of wrap this up by rattling off, the 18. I don't know why they had 18.
That's a lot.
Different foods. Well, how about let's just pick 5. So we'll each pick one. We'll kind of do a round robin. So I'll start with one, and you can't choose the same one. So I'm gonna say gummy candy because I love gummy bears until I tried them again, and I'm like, yeah, I'll eat them when my son's a little older, just because that's kind of like, hey, gummy bears, all right, I'll eat it. But right now, I'm not eating those.
That's too funny. Candy's not a big thing for me, but oh my gosh, I see cake on here. Cake is a big thing for me. And I still find it difficult if there's cake available not to overeat cake. So.
Okay. I would say cookies, since I already mentioned it earlier. So I have to say that would be another, especially with Girl Scout cookies coming up.
Oh, yeah. We've got a few. You want some boxes?
No,
I have
some
boxes.
I don't.
I'd like to get rid of them.
They're not that addictive that I want to spend $5 on a box. All right. What's next?
Oh, let's see here. I'm going to go with ice cream. Typically when I crave something like I usually let myself have some ice cream, and I don't go for that, low fat or diet ice cream crap.
No, it tastes like crap.
Right. I eat the real stuff, and allowing myself to have a little bit of ice cream every day after dinner, and I don't binge on it anymore. I mean, I used to restrict the ice cream, and literally I would be eating a half a gallon of ice cream on a Saturday.
Oh, wow.
And that's not healthy. So yeah, ice cream would be one for me.
All right. So the last one out of this list, I think that is pretty good. I'm going to go with soda because everybody drinks soda. I mean, whether it's...
I don't.
Yeah, the only thing I drink is Monsters. I don't know if that's soda or not because it doesn't have any calories in it.
You're probably more addicted to the caffeine in that, I would think, than the...
I am, but we've talked about that. That
right.
doesn't do anything. I think it's just a taste because it's like just sweet enough, so it's like a little bit, and then you get that, you're like, oh, that's good.
But I think that brings up, though, that hyper palatable thing because even the artificial sweeteners are shown to light up those areas of your brain.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like a reward thing.
Exactly.
Same thing. Yeah.
All right, so I think that's it, everybody. We talked about cravings, we talked about binging, we talked about some addictive foods. This is the Initiative Project podcast, and we will see you next time. If you like what you hear, please comment, subscribe, push that like and notification button on YouTube. That would be great. See you next time, guys.